morning, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to today's edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm Kaylee Nix here with Michael Vincent.
Hey, thanks, Kaylee. We'll continue the debate over whether speed limiters in trucks are good or bad, and hear about this week's episode of Loaded and Rolling. But our top story of the day takes us to Washington, D.C., and the FMCSA looking at the idea of making electronic load boards brokers. Some say yes, some say no. John Gallagher joins us now. What say you, John?
That question, it was one of about a dozen that the FMCSA put on this information gathering notice a couple of months ago. Figure out it's going to the question of the legality or illegality or trying to get a handle on illegal brokerage. And so the question was, should electronic bulletin boards be considered brokers and therefore be required to register as a broker? And it's an important question. That's an important question because the FMCSA it requires that brokers apply for authority. So and that entails making sure they have they show proof of insurance coverage in the form of a $75,000 surety bond, among other things. So again, that load board question was one of those questions, and most of those who responded to it said that these electronic load boards, which match shippers and carriers, and they charge a membership fee to access the board, should not be considered a broker. And for example, the Transportation Intermediaries Association said that, they're basically this information marketplace. They've evolved into these tech companies that are these information marketplaces that provide services for the whole entire marketplace. So they should not be considered a broker. OOIDA said that they said, they agreed. They said that as long as they're only displaying information and not actually processing money, then they're not a broker and they should not be considered brokers. Load boards themselves, a few of them weighed in too. And obviously their take was that, we're not handling any transactions. We're just a marketplace. We just charge this access fee. So therefore, we're not intermediaries, or we're not a broker. But you had these safety groups. The biggest ones that were kind of against it were some of the truck safety groups. And you've heard of these are the ones that always weigh in, like it's the Citizens for Reliable Safe and Highways, called CRASH. There's the Truck Safety Coalition, Parents Against Tired Truckers. They basically said that and their take was interesting. They said that by virtue of, and I'll look at it here, they said by virtue of accepting, approving, and listing carriers on their platforms, that process, they've determined, that these transportation providers have met their standards for being included on their platform, whatever those standards are. So because there was this level of selection that has taken place, they should be required to be brokers. And then you had others in there that talked about, because these load boards have been notorious for this whole issue of double brokering that has been going on, I think, and actually I linked to a story that our colleague Clarissa Hawes did about a month ago, talking about, is double brokering illegal just because of all that. And I think in her story, she talked about how this has cost one study that she listed said it costs it's costing the industry like $100 million a year, this illegal double brokering. So anyway, so there was that level of too, that because some of these load boards can be notorious for this double brokering, that they should register so that there is some level of accountability that goes with that, instead of just doing that and not being able to, they can double broker these loads or be, the backbone to these double brokered loads, and not have any accountability and say, and people complain, too bad. We're not, the FMC, the regulators have no authority over us.
Yeah, John, it's very interesting that this comes out of the double brokering conversation, because I think that it's a problem that's been plaguing the industry now for a while. And when we talk about kind of the digital revolution and the move to digital brokerage, it's something that invites almost a little bit of maliciousness into the way that things are done, right? But how can the actual crackdown of this happen if you've got people who are double brokering right now who are still just making the most of their ability to get in and do this maliciously?
Yeah, that's the big question. So this, and what I think the FMCSA by doing this might, if this exercise that the FMCSA is going through over over the definitions of what's called a bona fide agent, which works for a carrier, or which works for one or more carriers, versus what is a broker, which accepts money from the shipper so that they can find loads for carriers. That's basically what the FMC is trying to get to, and maybe out of this exercise, they'll be able to, once they get the definitions on what those are, because the problem is now the regulations are ambiguous. There are different parts of the regulations that talk about the definitions of a quote unquote bona fide agent and a broker, and whether a dispatcher is a broker or not. The dispatchers say they're bona fide agents that work for a carrier. They don't take money from they don't handle money at all. They do these back office functions, and they might negotiate. I think some would say that they might negotiate rates for the owner operators in the marketplace, but they don't actually handle money or actually book the loads, at least from what I understand. Maybe that's where the whole question is, on whether they're brokers or not. But anyway, by figuring out what these definitions, by this information gathering exercise, when they weigh in, they get these comments, and then maybe try to use that information to inform better guidelines on what constitutes a broker or a dispatcher, and whether a bona fide agent is a dispatcher or a broker or not, will lead to those guidelines might lead to moving forward with actual proposed rulemaking, and maybe that could help get to that, help solve that problem. Maybe that'll shed light on this whole double brokering situation, and whether, because like I said, they did ask whether a load board is should be considered a broker or not. That was one of the questions they're looking at. So maybe can happen down the road, and this is a kind of a start to that. One thing in looking through all those responses, the one thing that the common theme there was that everyone thought, everyone seemed to agree that there are illegal businesses out there. There are illegal businesses acting like brokers without broker authority, and that there should be a crackdown on that. So no matter what side of the issue that they were on, everyone sort of agreed with that. So we'll see if this leads to this guidance leads to a better way to define those regulations that affect brokering and dispatching.
Really confusing, obviously. It's even difficult to explain in a logical sequence. It really is. When you start talking about all the different things that could or couldn't be, and because they're not handling money or they're not actually booking the load, then they're not really a broker, they're just a dispatcher, et cetera. And I think it gets difficult to do that the more you question about double brokering. And double brokering is not illegal, but there is illegal double brokering, and there's nefarious activity, right? So, and we all understand that, but I'm just keeping everything straight in my own mind, which is difficult to do. But it would seem to me that a load board is not actually a broker, but there should be some accountability there for charging membership to be on it and vetting what you're putting on your load board. Because you're really stepping out there as John Gallagher's load board, not that there is one, but let's just say there is. If you present to me that there's this carrier, I'm kind of trusting that you've vetted them a little bit, right? Some of the onus on doing that's got to be on the load board, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I that makes perfect sense, and I think that's the problem that I think Clarissa kind of pointed out in her story that there's not that vetting going on, and it's costing a lot of money. So again, by asking that question, that the FMCSA acknowledges that too, and I think they're trying to answer that, or trying to help. Again, there's no regulations coming out of this, Michael, but it could help put a lot of clarity on it. Maybe we'll see if it could shed some more light on these the illegal double brokers.
All right, John. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you on. As always, we will talk to you again soon. Right now, we're going to head over to the carrier wall. We've got a first carrier update of the morning with Thomas Wasson.